Hi there. My name is John Weber Jr. I've been here at DDSP for 43 and a half years. I am a supply tech. For the past 25 years, I've worked out of Warehouse 87, where we certify hazardous material, and I have 40 years experience in hazardous material. I was born in Pennsylvania. My dad was in the service. He was a World War II and Korea War veteran. You've heard the term from Maine to California. I was very fortunate. I spent 5 years in California, and then I spent a couple years up in the New England states, Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, because that's where he went. Then when we returned to Pennsylvania in 1968, I tried to enlist. And unfortunately, they did not take me, and I was heartbroken. So when I got married, I said to my wife, I want to work for the federal government. So she said, okay, let's see what we can do. So we kept applying and applying and applying. Well, one day, I get this letter that the New Cumberland Army Depot is hiring 16 hours, Saturday and Sunday, and if I was interested to come over for an interview on this date. And being that I'm a military brat, I was familiar with the depot because I used to come over here as a kid with the commissary. So, and my interview was really interesting because I had never been on an interview before. I mean, I was working a civilian job, but I was never on an interview. So when I came in, we were sitting out in the hall, and they called your name, and I go in, and I sat across from this gentleman by the name of Mr. Boudreau. And he introduced himself, and I introduced mine, and we shook hands, and he knew right away I was scared. And I was, because this is something I really wanted, and I didn't want to blow it. And he looked at me, he said, young man, he said, this is a job interview, not an inquisition. He said, we're not going to tar and feather you. He said, are you nervous? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, let's take a walk. So him and I, we walked out, and at that time I smoked, and he smoked, and we got a soda, and we just chit-chatted about family. We didn't talk about the work or anything, and we did this for like maybe 10 minutes. And he said to me, he said, are you better now? I said, yeah. So we went back in, and we went through the whole interview. And he was throwing jokes out left and right. And so finally, when we got to the end, I figured, well, I'm going to try a joke. So I looked at him, and I said, sir, you realize, of course, that if you hire me here, there is a condition. You can work me long, but you can't work me hard. And he looked at me, and all of a sudden, everything went off his face. He was just stone cold. And I thought, oh, Lord, I blew this one. And he stood up and he said, young man, he stuck out his hand, he said, you'll make a fine federal employee. And he shook my hand. He said, you're hired. And the ironic thing was, whenever I come to work here, I worked for him for a short time. When I started here, I started in light pack, which was 84. But 90% of what I've ever done has been dealt with hazardous material. The way it all got started, and you'll have to bear with me on this because I get a little choked up on this story because what it means so much to me. When I was hired here, I was only hired to 16 hours, and I only worked Saturday and Sunday plus my regular job. Then they brought us all in April and brought us in career conditional. And I was working for Larry Finley, and I worked for him for about 3 months, and he come to me, he said, John, we're gonna send you up to Warehouse 5. He said, that's where I think the future is for you. And that was my introduction to hazardous material. So I go up to Warehouse 5, and I met an individual who had the greatest impact on my life, and he still does today. His name was Tom Haskell. He's a legend on this depot. And I worked for him for a little while, and he took me aside, and he said, young man, he said, I see your potential. He said, I like the way you work. Your attitude is great. He said, and I think you're going to make out well here. But he said, I want you to remember one thing. He said, this job is not about you, and this job is not about the money. This job is about the men and women who work for your freedom. And don't you ever forget it. And to this day, I didn't. 1 year, they were putting in a new heating system. And they hit the main pipe that comes down to our warehouse. Now, our warehouse is always the last one to get heat anyhow. Well, here it is, the middle of December, and we got no heat. So I called Tom, and I said, Tom, we got to do something. I said, we don't have any heat in this warehouse, and we're not going to have any. It wasn't a half hour. He come down, he looked the situation over, he said, okay, I'll get on it. He sent us coats, blankets, scarves, hats, gloves. And when he brought them all in, I went through the stuff and I said, Tom, you forgot something. What? I said, where's the underwear? Wasn't long, I had a pair of underwear coming down there too. I mean, I was just joking, but he sent it. Then he said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the doors off each bay. And I'm going to get these big salamander heaters, and you've seen these tubes that they put in these buildings when they're gutting them and they throw the stuff down the tubes into the trash bins. This is an accordion type of tube. He said, we're going to run them into the warehouse and get you guys some heat. So he got on the phone to Letterkenny, and he called up there and he talked to I think it was the supply officer. And the supply officer said, no, we can't do that. No, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So Tom said, okay. Put down the phone. He made another call, and this time he called the commanding general of Letterkenny. And it wasn't 10 minutes later that sergeant was calling Tom back, apologizing. Within 2 hours, they had 4 of them big salamanders down there and in the back of the warehouse. And every morning at 4 o'clock, regardless of the weather, Tom was out there filling them salamanders up for us. That's the type of individual Tom Haskell was. And that's why I just admired him so much. And of course, he mentored me through my career until he passed. And unfortunately, when Tom retired, he didn't live very long. And it was really sad for me. But I was gifted to the fact that I did a eulogy at his funeral. But he had the greatest impact, and he still does, because I still hear his voice in my head whenever something goes wrong and him straightening me out. He was just the best. In fact, to show you how great he was, some of the base commanders would ask his permission before they would do something. The only other individual on this that I really envied on this depot, and what it is when somebody makes one gesture of, I would say kindness, but it's respect. That sticks with me. And when this individual's name was Colonel Schmidt, he was the commander here. And before, in the 80s, before all this other stuff, we were not allowed to park in a controlled area. Only bosses and leads, and they had to have a special pass for their car. So what it was is we used to park above 54 there, and there would be a gate. The guard would come at 5 o'clock and open the gate, and we'd all come in that way. Well, I come in one February. It was cold. I mean, it had to be close to 0. And I looked over at the gate, and there this figure is standing, and I thought, now what idiot is standing out at this weather? So, and I seen him shaking these people's hands. So when I got up to him, and I realized that it was Colonel Schmidt. And he was there by himself. None of his entourage was there. It was just him. and he had his hand bare. And he was shaking everybody's hand and thanking them for a job well done that morning, as cold as it was. And when I got to him, I had my gloves on, and I took them off, because I was always told that you can tell a man's sincerity by his handshake. Well, he looked me right in the eye, and he almost crushed my hand, so I knew he was sincere. And that is the only base commander that I ever had that kind of respect for. Where he is today, I don't know, but he was, them two people meant the world to me, especially Tom. You know, nobody will ever take Tom's place. 9/11 was the busiest time that I can remember in years, and we were working round the clock 7 days a week to get it out. I mean, it was just mind blowing. Any of the hazardous material that the troops needed. Now, we don't necessarily deal in only hazardous material. We have general freight that goes out too. Batteries. You know, it's hard to really explain unless you go to the warehouse and see it. But hazardous material is what the building is for. But we have general freight that we also ship out. So it's a combination of both. I believe in the United States of America, and I believe in the men and women who guard this country. So I was never able to serve in the military, so I made a choice to serve the military. That's what keeps me here. Now, I don't know how much longer I'm going to go, because I just turned 72, so I think there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. But it'll be a sad day, because I've done this for so long, and I love the job. I love the job. And the people I work with down in 87 are outstanding people. To me, they're the best people in the DOD.